Hello, in this video I'm going to think about the difference in regulation of the Bluthner patent action, which is on most Bluthner grand pianos made before 1925, and then the standard action that you find in most grand pianos. So this one has a lever here, so it's called a roller lever action or repetition lever, and it allows us, the idea is to allow quick repetition. So if I release the back check by just taking my finger off the key a little bit, then a hammer goes upwards and it can repeat rapidly. That's the idea of that style of the action with the repetition lever. So there's a spring here that you adjust the tension to move it up. The set off, the let off, pulls off here forwards. That allows the hammer to escape from the string, and then it checks and then it goes up near to the string. So checks and then goes up near to the string. So on the Bluthner patent action, this let off is in reverse, so it lets off, escapes out of the jack that way, and you see that the let off adjuster is behind. So you need a different type of adjuster here. You can see, I'll show you the tool that we use for that. So in the standard action, the let off is adjusted with a tool that you just put in this hole here on the let off button, and then it lets it off either earlier or later, according to that's going to let it off earlier. The idea is to get the hammer really to let off as close to the string as possible, but to be within a margin of safety, because if it doesn't let off at all, if we take this button right up, for instance, so it's not working, then the hammer will block against the string. There we are, it doesn't let off, and obviously that's no good, it's going to dampen off the string. So you adjust it back down so that it works, and then perhaps put a margin of safety as well. It's really a question of getting it as close as possible, and now it's letting off, so obviously you want to get it as close as possible for sensitive playing, so you can play quieter sensitively, but the idea is to get it to definitely let off. It mustn't block the string. So the let off on the Bluthner patent is, as I say, the jack is letting off in the opposite direction, and it's adjusted with this kind of tool, which you use for other types of adjustments on pianos as well. And so that's turning backwards and forwards, exactly the same idea. Now, we commonly find that the let off does need adjusting on the Bluthner patent. Often it lets off extremely early, but of course if you're setting the action out, the most important thing to start with is the key dip. So how far does the key go down? And generally, there's lots of opinion on this, but generally most people set it at 9.5 to 10.5 millimeters. I'll show you what that means on some grands that we got in stock. And the blow distance, that's the distance of the hammer to the string, and this is meant to be a string here. So the hammer to the string is 44 roughly on Bluthner grand pianos, 44. So on a standard action, it's normally regulated between 10 millimeters and 11 millimeters key dip. And the blow distance is set normally at 47. It can be between 44 and 48, possibly 49 even. It does vary a bit from manufacturer to manufacturer. You can see roughly on here it's at 47 millimeters. Obviously it's very rough, but if you're on the road and the blow distance is too great, normally you would adjust the capstan first. So it's a combination between key dip and blow distance you want to set up first before you do the other adjustments. And on the Bluthner patent you can see it's roughly at 44 on this model here. So I've got a set of key dip gauges here from 9.5, 10, 10.5, 11 millimeters. Those are the ones we normally use. And I've taken the opportunity to test all the pianos we have in this showroom. So most of the uprights were 10.5 millimeters key dip, with one exception. The Fatser was about 10 millimeters. This Bluthner grand here was the shallowest. It's just under 9.5 millimeters. And this 1910 Bluthner, the other one was 1909, is 9.5 almost exactly. And this Bluthner 1920 is almost exactly 10.5. And this Bluthner 1905 has a replacement action in, so it's a normal roller action put in there, and that is exactly 10.5. And this Bechstein 1905 is just over 11, and in fact on digital keyboards usually the key dip is 11 or just over. And this 1900 Broadwood is also just over 11. So the key dip on most Bluthner patents is going to be between 9.5 and 10.5 millimeters. The greater the key dip, then the greater the blow distance generally, and the blow distance is only 44 here, so a little bit less key dip. And by the way, this is really important, that this needs to sit on the rail here, whereas on a standard action it's just above the rail. So on the standard action it doesn't need to sit on the rail because you've got this repetition spring holding it up. So on the Bluthner patent, the shank needs to sit on the rail. That's really important without the repetition lever, because it might not function if it's not sitting on the rail. And by the way, this spring here is really crucial to regulate this spring correctly. It's best regulated, from my experience, of pulling it backwards rather than taking it out and trying to bend it. There's a slight chance you can break it here. Not a very great chance, but if you bend it upwards, there's a slight chance you can break it there, and you obviously don't want to do that. So you've got to push it right in, by the way, just when you check it, and you mustn't damage this felt here. So that's quite important. And so if you want it to operate, if you want the spring tension to be greater, you pull it backwards, and that greatens the spring tension. You can bend it, as I say here, but there's a slight chance that you will break it. And now, and they last for just centuries. These they will last and last, so there's no need to worry about that so much. It's important that the spring tension isn't so great that it will end up here. So let's just see if I can show you what will happen if the spring tension is too great. So I'll pull it backwards and we'll make the spring tension too great, and now it's sitting up, so that's much too great, and it obviously wants to fall back down, so we have to lessen the spring tension and it'll fall back down and sit, and now it's come out, so I've got to push it back in again, and now it should sit on the rail, and ideally after it's checked it should go upwards slightly, and this one does. So I managed to get the spring tension as good as you're going to get it. This hinge does need to be free, so you may have to change the center pin here. If you lubricate here with Protect, which is the standard thing that hinges are lubricated with in the piano trade, then it's not as good as actually changing the center pin, which we recommend and we do ourselves. Having said that, Protect's perfectly alright. It's just in the long term we would, if it's our own pianos, we prefer to change these. But if you're out on the road and you're a piano tuner, then we fully understand if you use Protect. Try to get as little on as possible, and you'll find it makes a huge difference. And then this moves more freely, so the spring may not go up, may not cause it to go upwards if this is too tight. So that's quite important to know. A check we recommend on Bluthner patent actions is to press the note right down and then lift it up very slowly, and if it doesn't play a second time, that's because this spring needs strengthening. It's quite common when pianos are being set up in the first place, so you bring this up and then play it suddenly, and if it's not working the second time, it's because the tension of the spring isn't great enough. I'll try and illustrate that. Let's bend this back so it's not going to be strong enough, so let's just make that weaker, and let's see what happens with middle C here. And then the second time it doesn't play because the spring's not strong enough. So we'll need to strengthen the spring, pulling it backwards, and you won't break the spring like this. I've never had that happen to me. The only time it's broken one, as I've mentioned, is when you pull it up, take it out, and you try and bend this joint here. But you won't normally bend it. This has got to be pressed right under, and you do have to be careful not to damage the felt here. So now let's try playing it and then lifting it up very slowly and then try and hit it again. It's working fine. Now you can see actually that it's moving up and it's going to be too tense, I think, so we need to check that the hammer is coming back onto the rail. So if we look at the hammer, you can see it's hitting the string almost twice there, so the string's too strong and it's not coming back and sitting on the rail either. So I've weakened the spring slightly so that it's coming up. That's ideal really. As I release the back check, it's going upwards and going back and sitting on the rail. So that's a brief look at regulating the Bluthner patent action. Now, around round about the turn of the century, 1900, there were just as many Bluthners in the UK as Bechsteins. Bluthner were making just as many pianos, and as Steinways in Europe, I believe, too. So all three manufacturers, Bosendorf was making many less, but of the top manufacturers, these three manufacturers were making about the same number of pianos. So there are plenty of Bluthner grand pianos in the UK, and I can really recommend them. They have a wonderful smooth feel to the action, and Bluthner's, up until 1925, stuck with their style of action because there were many people who liked it, and it does indeed feel extremely smooth and beautiful to play. The tone is just delicious, really. And totally reliable, just as reliable as any standard action. So thank you very much for listening. If you're interested in having a Bluthner Grand restored, then please do write to info@robertspianos.com, or if you're interested in one of the pianos we have in stock, of course, we'd love to sell you one.